Narendra Sarwan from LV Prasad is also the editorial board of Legal Ophthalmology.
Good morning. What I am going to do is, I am not going to talk about science or anything that you may be expecting. I am just going to talk what have been my journey as an ophthalmologist, as I grew up, and what I have been doing and how I have been doing, and contributing to the science or contributing to the published literature or criticizing or critiquing, and how you can take cues from that. So therefore, I'll start with I thought that it's easy. It's important for everyone to understand that how and where I come from. I grew up in a very small village in Haryana and did my MBBS and MS in Medical College, Rohtak. And most of you or most places, the how you do science is not taught in a medical school. Unfortunately, at least not in Rohtak. That publications are important, reading article is important. Then I did my fellowship in LV Prasad Institute in 1992 and 93, and then I joined Orbis International, which is a flying eye hospital based in New York. And my idea at that time was there's nothing. I got the opportunity. I just let you to hear that if you can hear. Can you hear or no? But anyway, most of you know about Orbis, right? There's no point. This is only controlling my microphone. It's not only. This is okay, leave it. So my idea at that time was that I'll be able to see the world. And my reasoning was simple. If I'll have money, I'll not go to places where Orbis goes, because it goes to very poor countries. And if I have money, if I don't have money, anyway, I'll not be able to travel. So I said, this is the best time of life that I can travel and see the world. And that's why I joined Orbis, but I learned a lot during that process of 2.5 years. And then I ended up in Boston doing a research fellowship, and everybody told me that's the most stupid decision anybody can make. That after doing a clinical fellowship, you are going back to lab and doing 2 years fellowship, in that also in ocular immunology, uveitis, what is this? I mean, either do in refractive surgery or do in cataract. But that was not attractive for me. Somehow I didn't feel like doing that. I just wanted to do something, and on Orbis, I found that Dr. Foster probably is the world authority on the subject, and I ended up with him for 2 years. After completing the fellowship, I came back at LVP, and what I started seeing, what you are seeing here, the kind of patients that you are seeing here, the mostly neglected kind of diseases, that there is nothing for that, nothing that you can do about it, and all of us were writing eye drops, just give it this, give that. But at the same time, I read an article by Pellegrini in Lancet that there is something that you can grow the cells on amniotic membrane and can treat these kind of patients with severe ocular surface. When I started asking this question, the answers I got was very different. They said, no, these things don't work in India, these are not for us, they're only for journals, this and that. So I chose to focus my energy only in this area. I chose not to be doing refractive surgery. I do a lot of cataract surgery for the livelihood, but not really for intellectual stimulation. So I chose to focus energy, and fortunately we were able to start doing, after a lot of hard work and trying to set up the process and growing the cells. I'll not go in the details of that story, but eventually in last 13, 14 years, what we have been able to contribute. In this particular field, we have published, and we have published extensively, and clinical side, this particular series of more than 800 patients with autologous cultivar limbal transplant today is a benchmark. And if you see these articles which we have published in different journals, basically create an evidence. Now, what we are talking about level 1, randomized, these are not randomized. These are simple cases we did based on what selection criteria, based on what we thought is right, and then just been analyzing them. Today, all our studies are compared with the original inventor of the technique, Dr. Pellegrini. That their paper is in New England Journal of Medicine, our paper in BJO. But the technique, the outcomes, totally different techniques, but the outcomes are exactly the same. So what we have been able to create, that an alternative way of growing the cells, which is less expensive, technically less demanding, and coming from a developing country, which most people are bothered about it, that, oh, somebody in India can do this kind of work. In the process, and remember, see, I was not trained in research at all. I just chose to do a research fellowship. Then now if you see the kind of projects that I am doing, a Wellcome Trust funded grant where we can find an alternative to amniotic membrane. And that's a big €1 million grant between two of us. Then this sample amount grant and the Australian grant. So several of these trials only related to this work. Most recently, in last about 8-9 months, I don't know how many of you understand that limbal stem cell transplant we grow in the lab. But the major problem with that is that everybody doesn't have a lab. And if you don't have a lab, and that having a lab is very expensive. Each procedure costs very high. So that is a major barrier for this technique to apply to a larger human population. So what I have been struggling thinking, can it be done right on the eye? And last year and a half, we have been able to come with a technique that you can actually take the limbal biopsy from the normal eye. The way exactly you grow in the lab, you do the same thing on the surface of the eye. And this is a gentleman, this is a young boy who's a BTech student, he was like this before surgery, and this is after autologous on the surface, no lab, direct cultivation, and his vision is 20/20. Now, this will change the way cell-based therapy works for the ocular surface. You may not have again randomized trial, but now what this experience has given me the confidence that maybe I should be able to answer the questions which still not answered is what is the mechanism of action of the limbal stem cell in restoring ocular surface? How we can improve the surgical outcome and technique of the clot. There is another technique of stromal keratocyte stem cells which you can apply. So we're working with somebody in US. So we're trying to answer these questions because these questions are not there. See, the questions come only from your work. It can't be a hypothetical question. So now what I am going to talk is that there is clearly, all of you will agree that there is a gap between the clinician's understanding of research and the role in evidence-based practice and existing literature. Meaning that all of us don't know what exists there in the literature. We will limit it by how much we have read, how much time we have to read about, and what we hear from the experts, what we learn from others. And this was put very aptly by an article by Butler in Nature, which says that crossing the valley of death. Meaning it is talking about in the context of NIH and translational research, but I am bringing this to a clinician and the patient. Can you bridge that gap of what already exists and then move on? In my view, the difficulties and challenges for every clinician are that if you talk to most of us will say we are too busy with clinical work, we don't have time. Clinical work is rewarding both money and fame. Anyway, so why should I do it? Don't know how to write. Don't have motivation to collect the data, analyze, write, submit to journal, deal with the rejection, corrections. That rather do a cataract surgery, earn a lot of money, you get respect from the society around you, and you're very happy. That's why nothing wrong with it. And then you say, well, I don't have system to document findings, take photos or record surgeries. You know, there are practical problems. And some of the says, I just don't understand why should I do research. What is that I get if I do a research? So, how do you start believing in something that what you believe in? I'm just giving you an example which is not related to medicine. How a paradigm or a perception, how a belief system is formed. A group of scientists placed 5 monkeys in a cage and in the middle a ladder with a banana on the top. Every time a monkey went up the ladder, the scientists soaked the rest of the monkeys with cold water. After a while, every time a monkey went up to the ladder, the others will beat up the one on the ladder. Why? Because of him, they think that you are getting a cold shower. After some time, no monkey there to go up the ladder, regardless of the temptation. Scientists then decided to substitute one of the monkeys. Then first thing this new monkey did was to go up the ladder. And immediately the other monkeys beat him up. So after several beatings, the new member learned not to climb the ladder even though never knew why. Second monkey was substituted, third was done, fourth, same the whole of the 5 new monkeys were changed and they did exactly the same thing. What was left was a group of 5 monkeys that even though never received a cold shower, continued to beat up any monkey attempting to climb up the ladder. If it was possible to ask these monkeys why they would beat up all those who attempted to go up the ladder, I bet you the answer would be, I don't know, that's how the things are done around here. Sounds very familiar, isn't it? Then as Einstein says, there are only two things are infinite, the universe and the human stupidity, and I'm not sure about the former. So why I'm saying is that because all of us, we don't stop and ask the question, why should I not do research? If I want consumption of research, if I want to be better, see, it's an innate human quality to improve yourself. You are suppressing that. So because what you are seeing is around what is happening around you, and that's how the paradigms are formed. So now look at what a researcher, whether it's a clinician or a ophthalmologist, whatever way, what you will get if you start getting interested in the research. Access to recent and better treatment options, that if you are, say for example, a reviewer, or if you are participating in a clinical trial, you know exactly what is the cutting edge. Professional development, increased peer recognition and relationship, publication, platform for exchange of ideas, improved documentation. If somebody is examining you, your documentation will improve. If you know that it is only for you, you are not, it's okay, scribble something, it's fine, and give it to the patient. Modify patient management guidelines or treatment modalities, and global blend of ideas. So variety of this. KOL is key opinion leader. These are companies sort of name us, okay, he's a key opinion leader, that what you say it matters. So there are a host of benefit. And then the question is why doctors are needed for research. In my view, the unique perspective and priorities that we have. What is the unique perspective? If a guy sitting in the lab would have a very different perspective about a disease. Say for example, he thinks that, okay, if I do the CD4 count in a HIV patient, I'm going to prove something or other. But as a clinician, you have totally different priorities, different perspective. Doctors see the disease differently. Why? Because the disease process keeps changing. For example, there is a patient that I have been treating who is of allergy, and we have been treating because it's a syndrome of hyper IgE syndrome, and I did not know about it until, because I just treated with a VKC, he has eczema, he has dermatitis. I've been treating with systemic steroid and everything fine. And one of my fellow, when he presented the case, she came and told me, sir, this is a Job syndrome, and in hyper IgE syndrome they have, and they are more susceptible to infection. So when he gets keratitis, the doctors will automatically stop and steroid. They say no, but it will deteriorate. But the patient says, every time I get infection, my other doctor starts steroid and they get better. So understand, so the perspective that what we have is very different. And then we don't realize the value of access to the patient, the tissues, the fluid, the material that we have and what we can do with it. We see the areas where there is a need for research, meaning that human disease is a moving target. It's not that AMD or VKC or scleritis, one day you see it is going to be the same every day. It's so different. In every patient is different. Evolution is different. We are concerned with the optimization, not just discovery. For example, Avastin for AMD. It's just a doctor thought that it might be a good idea to inject. And we have so many of this. And simply this direct clot, which I just showed you, is simply if you talk to somebody who's a basic scientist, you will never think about it. Because it's just like saying, okay, if I do, that fear is, then that means my job will go away, because then I'm a scientist, I may lose the job. But as a clinician, I'm not concerned about it. So how you can get involved in the research? There are so many options, there are so many ways that even if you are in a private practice, you are a single practitioner, you can write about case reports, a series of patients, what you see normally. Retrospective case series, prospective studies, either individual case, your practice, or combined with other, review of literature of your interest with other colleagues, take clinical photos or surgical videos if you can, which today's involved is not very difficult if you think little outside the box. The new surgical technique or diagnostic test, clinical trials. So there are so many options. In a formal way, if you are interested, today there are a lot of opportunities of getting involved in the clinical trial directly or indirectly. You can start writing or helping companies with developing protocols that will help you to get better. If you're good with numbers, maybe become an analyst or basically scientific analysis of data for the companies, for journals, help in developing teaching and marketing material. So it all depends on you how much you want to get involved. What are different ways and means that you can do? You can do yourself if you have expertise in most cases. You can form a group with other clinicians of like-minded or similar. Say for example, if you are seeing CRVO or BRVO in a particular area, maybe you should all get together and say maybe you should document in a particular way and then form a case series and analyze and publish. Or you can start collaborating with this IIT or other basic institutes that you have. It's not necessary that you have to PhD next to you. If you can think beyond your boundaries, then you can collaborate with other groups. You can do a disease specific. That's the easiest thing in your own practice. What are the most common diseases? That's what I have been doing. I've been focusing only on the things that I see. And in the process, what happens, you get more of that because you're publishing, because you're talking, and slowly over a period of time, you become an expert in that. Because nobody becomes expert just by getting a degree. Then you maybe form a network. Maybe you can form an area-wide network. How do you start? Maybe attitude and willingness to contribute to science. Get excited to see your name in the literature. Start paying attention to documentation and keep records or consider using electronic medical record. Documentation, I find in most places is not very good. And the tradition of giving that card to the patient, go away, you will never start a research. You must, however small your practice is, start having a regular record and keep with yourself. Start taking photos, record videos of interesting cases or findings. Start working with medical graduates. Have people rotate with you, because they will make you work harder, and they'll bother or they'll challenge you in everyday practice. Look for opportunities to publish in lay press, like public education articles in popular press, state journals or Indian Journal of Ophthalmology, international journals. There are online journals. There's so many things that if you have inclination, you can start doing it. The bottom line then comes is what questions I can answer. Do I have questions? These are very obvious questions. Do we need to see a patient after uneventful phaco for 1 week? Do you have evidence? Please go and look at it. I can bet you that there is no evidence that we have to see. Then why do we see at 1 week, 5 weeks? This is because our habit. It's tradition. That's what we have been taught. And that's what the monkey paradigm is. So ask this question. If not, maybe a simple answer. You don't need anything else. You can answer that question by yourself with somebody else, maybe an MBA student, maybe another student. Post-cataract surgery, when should you refract? 1 week, 4 weeks? Does it make a difference? But again, we have not asked that question, and you don't have an answer in the literature. I have been trying to answer this question because I think that it has, and what is the value of it? Value of it is, if you see a hospital where you are seeing 1,000 or 1,500 patients, out of that, 200 patients are 1 week post of cataract surgery. If you are not doing anything other than saying stop Ciplox, continue spread acetate or steroid for this thing I can tell on phone, this thing I can tell by email, or can just tell them on the day one itself. What is it you are picking up? If you can reduce the patient that he don't have to come to the hospital, he has to come and bring another attendant, then he will wait in the waiting lounge, he will reuse your resources, you can reduce the cost to the society. It will make the life much simpler for that. Or if you think that no, I am picking something which was not there, that's a value addition. Then you say, well, we should see because we are picking up so and so things. Why should we use a topical steroid post this? There is no evidence. Post of cataract surgery, why you can't use a non-steroidal and anti-inflammatory? There is no evidence that you should use only topical steroids. For uveitic cataract, using a pre-op steroids in all patients, to me, doesn't make sense at all. But that's what the experts say. That's what the textbooks say. But I have been practicing differently. And I'm trying to create studies which will be accepted by most people. For example, VKC. Now again, I'm giving you examples that I see these kind of patients. So what I can do, what are the questions I can answer out of that? I don't have to think too much that, okay, I want to do a randomized trial, I want to do this and that. Just simple question that you will have in the clinic, the simple question the patient will have. And some of these questions, if you see through these publications, we have answered, at least in part, but still not a long way to go. And now we have done a study, a prospective study by a DNB student of limbal stem cell deficiency in VKC, glaucoma in VKC, cataract surgery outcome in VKC, sealed ulcer in VKC, and what is the blinding potential? Because if you see the VKC data is only Western, nothing, and they don't see the disease at all. So we treat our patient based on what they are publishing. Why we are busy seeing our patient, we don't want to publish, so we don't publish. So we'll obviously treat the patient wrong. What you read there, you don't see in your patients. Similarly, the cataract, uveitic cataract, just highlighted that there is hardly any publication, but we have so much of uveitic cataract from India. And we have not, there are so many questions that needs to be answered. I had one fellow from Maharashtra. he practices in Aurangabad now. At that time, we have looked at patients operated by me. I don't use pre-operative steroids for every patient unless there is specific indication. And Dr. Rajiv Budhi, who was before me in LVP, he used to give every patient. So I said, please look at the outcome or immediate post-op who has raised inflammation more or less. And we published that in IJO in 2001. There is no difference. And my rationale is simple, that why do you need to increase the steroids for everyone while the uveitis is not the same disease in every patient? The FHC is different than HLA-B27, then VKH, then sympathetic ophthalmia. All are very different. And if your patient is already on control, well controlled on medicines which you have been giving, why you need to increase? What is going to happen if you don't give for 12 hours? See selectively and see next day morning, and if it's increased, then you treat, otherwise no need. So that is a kind of insights only we can have clinicians, and we should not wait for somebody else to create evidence for that. The same thing, fixed heterochromic iridocyclitis. That I am very much convinced that if you see a patient with the PSC, posterior subcapsular cataract, with mobile pupil, with no history of trauma, with no history of even if there is no synechiae, if there is no KPs, hydrochromia, I'll still wait and see. This maybe I'm dealing with FHC. But now I've been talking to my friends. How do you put these three things together and say this is a possible combination of clinical signs and symptoms that you can use as a diagnosis? Because otherwise these patients, every day I see that they are thoroughly investigated, they're given intravitreal steroid injection because the diagnosis is not made. Because you don't have classical KPs, you don't have classical heterochromia, but you won't have classical everything in every patient. Similarly for keratitis, like if you are seeing a lot of patients, there's many things that you can answer. Like this publication which we did recently, we saw a patient, I don't have that photograph, that patients like everything on the cornea, but no reaction at all. The patient doesn't have any photophobia, the patient doesn't have this. And when we scraped, my microbiologist started jumping. He said, this is a new organism. Then he submitted to that online database. They said, yes, this infection, human infection with this bacteria is not reported. So you cannot discover that unless you are clinically very good or you are understanding what you are seeing. Similarly, this patient I saw very early on in 2001. This is a young girl from J&K. Had 5-6 consultations before reaching there, and what was very unusual, she had tarsal necrosis with given supratarsal steroid injection for VKC because she was presumed to have VKC. Then she had some conjunctival biopsy, but she had a elevated sort of hypertrophy here, the KPs and this. And to me it looked like I don't know what it is. It looks very weird. I have never seen a patient with tarsal necrosis with the steroid injection. Why should this girl have? So I went ahead and did the biopsy, did AC tap, and then did all the studies. And what it turned out? Tuberculosis. So now after that I saw 2-3 other patients with conjunctival tuberculosis. Then I just told a student or fellow with me, maybe we should put these cases together and publish as a case as a CPC in archives. So these are the things that you can, now you'll say, no, I don't have histopathology, no, I don't have microbiology, because you are obsessed with what you don't have. But you are not seeing what you have and what you can make best use of your clinical skills. So in summary, what I will say is start doing some form of research. Start questioning yourself. Don't remain in that monkey paradigm. And that monkey paradigm, I'll tell you a story. When I was a resident, one of my PZ used to write papers in the morning. We used to go to camp and all that. I said, what are you doing? He said, I'm writing paper. I said, I thought you need to do a study to write a paper. He said, no, you'll understand when you grow up. You are just a house surgeon, you don't know about these things. I said, but that is common sense for me. I mean, how you can write paper without doing? He said, no, this is how it is done. So most of our theses are CCC, copy, cut and paste. You have never done the research. I think that all of us are responsible for it. We must change that. Otherwise, we'll keep creating trash. So acquire skills to build strong base for research. Research you can do even after your hands are trembling. Because that will be, as long as you don't get Alzheimer's, you will be able to think very clearly till you die. You organize your resources, we have access to most precious material, that is the patient and the patient related material. Learn to collaborate, develop networking, and I wish you a happy research and publishing. I'll just leave with you with this video. If I don't know you can hear or not. Your mic. Anyway, this is a story. I just want to leave with you because a blind person, Eric became blind at age of 30. By the age of 32, he has climbed all the highest peaks all over the world. He has written books now. All of us have eyesight but no vision. He has vision but no eyesight. If he can do, why can't we do it? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Virendra. And I think even Helen Keller has mentioned that nobody should be blind, but I think the people are blind with vision. And I think Helen Keller mentioned it, who is already a blind. And I think, I hope, I don't know what Vishwas has to say, but I think this is what probably I'm doing the workshop after Baronet, make people enjoy what you're doing. And I think doing research is kept separate, writing paper is kept separate, and reading patient has been kept separate in whatever curriculum we are going through from medical college.
But it's not good.
No, that's right. We are kept,
It has to be the same. All of us are the same people, activities.
No. What I'm saying, that's what I'm happy you brought it out. I think the whole thing is you keep doing practice and you also keep enjoying publishing even as a single case report or as you said in the YouTube or iTube and so many forums available.
And please understand, I am not a good writer at all. I am not a good scientific writer.
So who
If
writes
I were,
for
I
you?
would have been able to publish more than 1,000 papers because the amount of work I generate, I see roughly 250 patients per week. 120 patients per day on 2 OPDs and do roughly about 35 to 40 surgeries. These things I do write myself, but most of the work is done by either my students or my other colleagues. If I were a very good scientific writer, I would have been able to do much more. But simply, I think I'm not cut out for good scientific writing. So I said, okay, this is better that somebody who can do it better than me. So it's not necessary that you have to be a scientific writer to write. You can always find other people who are good at that and collaborate.
I think if you go through even Lancet and the Nature, I think the people who write are definitely not the best in writing, but I think the best in working and collating data and then analyzing. And I think that's what yesterday Nitya brought out, that interpretation don't leave to somebody. You have to have a good interpretation. I think that's what finally you have to learn. So for that, probably you have to learn to write.
No, as a clinician, you should learn to interpret that what is important clinically. Nobody else can tell you, a statistician can't tell you what is good effect size or what is bad effect size. It's you to decide whether this 0.2 millimeter increase in the phaco wound will reduce the astigmatism by 0.5 diopter. Does it make any sense to you? If it increases the cost 30,000 rupees, are you interested? Even if somebody wants to convince you, are you convinced about it? Would you get that surgery yourself? Then if you can't get it yourself, why should you operate on anybody? So that thinking has to be part of our decision making, that I should be able to make that clinically relevant decisions for my patients, and when we consume the research, we should be able to understand. That is why it's important to learn all this research. That is important for you to understand all these nuances or the tricks and techniques of publishing, understanding the literature.
Inquisitiveness is the first prerequisite. Once you have inquisitive mind, you will always find an answer.
Yeah, somebody told me, sir, that in medical college, when the brightest students go to the medical college, and by the time they come out, they become donkeys because they forgot to ask the questions. They all, get into the same kind of thing. I think that's again a basic human nature to ask questions. And if you forget that, then it's a problem.
Sachi, you should ask them a
Let me ask you
question.
a question.
Yes, sir. Okay.
Myself, Dr. Pradeep, your presentation was really excellent, and you have already shown everything regarding all practical aspects of research. I'm very much thankful for that. We are getting a lot of encouragement due to that. Let me ask you one question, that you have shown one case of limbal granuloma of tuberculosis. That case.
Yes.
In many cases, I have seen that in poor patients, we cannot do so many investigations. We do only the routine investigations. And in these cases, is it possible to give a therapeutic trial in such cases?
Fine. Absolutely fine. If you strongly feel about it, and if you don't have this, But what I will say is that you treat and still don't give up that, okay, if I given a therapeutic trial and then I don't know whether it worked or not. But if you have a strong intuition or clinical sense that it looks like tuberculosis, and then you can always find somebody, if not there, somebody else who can do the exophthalmology for you. Because the important for that is that if you do a therapeutic trial and you do steroids also, then you don't know whether your steroid worked or INH
In
worked.
these cases, I never put even topical also steroids. All these ocular cox cases, especially, I've been treating for last almost 25 to 30 years almost, and I've treated more than 200 cases where I could not do so many investigations because that was a total rural area and of very poor patients they used to have these problems. So in these cases we were tried with some trial for a month or two, and when we were getting very good response, immediately the picture was changing. So we are continuing up to 6 months, 8 months like that. What we should do now in these?
So what I suggest in those situations is that if you were aware that if you can collect that data in some whatever way you can,
Yeah,
and then trying to bring it to everybody's other people's attention, maybe that you'll get, we will get ideas.
Yeah, that data is almost ready. More than 200 cases I have that data. But I don't know how to proceed because so many new investigations are there. PCR and other people are doing. That facility was not available with us, or not still is not available. So whether to go ahead.
You have to discuss in the tea break because the
Okay.
scope of the workshop is
Right.
on how to write. No, I want find out from person like that you just finished MS and doing the fellowship. There are enough material to write, but if you don't write, maybe Alok also should answer that and learn from very much. I don't know how to stimulate all of this. So enough material to write, but you are not writing.
So now ask the question why maybe you are not good at it. See, sometimes we
No,
don't
no, I'm
think-
not good at it,
No,
but
no,
I'm telling
you know,
them.
I'm not saying even the other person. Maybe see that in our life ultimately what we do things which we like. So if you understand what you like and what you dislike, then the things are not very difficult. Then it's easier. The problem is that you don't understand what you are good at, or you don't want to accept that you are not good at it. So if you can sort of clarify to yourself that why I am not able to write, you say maybe I don't like it. If you don't like it, maybe if you strongly, maybe I should find somebody who can help me with that, either writing, analyzing, or maybe putting the things in perspective. So talk to somebody else. Not everybody has the same problem.
No, I think it's like the same the monkey problem. I think the problem is everybody says it's not writing. No, I'm seriously telling. I think it's like the thinking process.
Yes,
they're
that's why I
really,
showed that experiment.
no. Their people are potentially good, but they don't know their own potential. Potential. I mean, they don't know their own potential.
The elephant can't see their own feet, so they don't know their own size. What is their potential?
No, what? You have some doubts.
Anybody?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Just a comment. This research is like marriage. You never did it before. Never mind. Try it, you will succeed.
No, I agree. No. How to stimulate the people who are just doing postgraduate? As he rightly said, don't do a price. Next, we have a Bangladesh comer whom I first met.